Okay, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld.com. Thanks for joining us for this Fall 2015 Financial Automation Webcast Series event. Today I'm happy to welcome back two returning speakers for us from Microsoft. They are Teresa Nisler and Jared Hall. This event has really had a great response from MS Dynamics World readers. It's one of our best ever, and clearly it just indicates the level of interest in the new release of NAV, NAV 2016. And we're really glad to be able to host this event for you. Before we get started, I would also just like to recognize our Financial Automation Series sponsors and thank them for their support of the site. They are Perceptive Software, Metafile, Esker, DocStar, and Avalara. So as we get started, please note that you can use the Q&A block that you should see to the right of the main window to ask your questions at any point during the event. Teresa and Jared will be leaving time at the end to answer questions. And without further delay, I am going to hand things off to Jared to get started. Jared, are you there? Jared, I'm going to take it off mute.
Oh, thanks.
Right.
Can you hear?
We can.
All right. Thanks, Jason. I'm going to share my screen, and we'll get going.
All right, we see that. Yep.
Thanks. So, as Jason mentioned, I'm Jared Hall. I'm here with Teresa Nisler, and we're going to be talking about Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2016 Finance Enhancements. Dynamics NAV 2016 just recently came out last month, and there were a lot of really great enhancements. So this session, we're talking specifically about the enhancements to Dynamics NAV that are related to finance. Teresa and I had the opportunity to work on quite a few of these. We're program managers in the Fargo, North Dakota office for Microsoft, and we work quite a bit on the finance side of our SMB products. Which entails Dynamics NAV and GP and taking that opportunity. So we're going to jump into this. Our agenda for today, we're going to start out just briefly talk about a few of the enhancements that were for finance that were in NAV 2015. There are three that we wanted to call out, some of the larger features that were put into Dynamics NAV 2015. And just do a quick overview of those before we jump into 2016. We'll talk about the NAV 2016 enhancements, and as Jason mentioned, we're going to leave time at the end for Q&A, so we'll make sure we have time there to answer your questions. And then we'll finish out with a call to action. Teresa's got some pointers for you on where you can go to get more information on what we're talking about today. So we'll start out with a quick overview of 2015 enhancements. The first one is a bank data conversion service. So we've partnered with AMC, which is a company that handles electronic banking. And what we've been able to do with them is be able to, from our payments and electronic files, be able to use them as a data conversion service to help us communicate with our banking services. So if we have files in Dynamics NAV, such as payments that we want to transfer to our bank, and we need to be able to communicate with that bank in a format that our bank can understand, AMC does that data conversion for us. So we can, on our payment journals, we've added a button that you can export, and that sends our data from NAV out to AMC. They do all the data conversion for us and send it back in a file, the file in a format that our bank can understand. We just tell them which bank we're going to be using, they convert the data, send it back to us so that can be transferred to our bank. This is a service through AMC, and through a partnership with them, one bank account is provided free of charge. If you need more than that, there's additional pricing information, but that's something that we can that's made available in making those electronic payments. Related to those electronic payments is receiving files. So the next new feature that we want to point out is the payment reconciliation journal. So we can send out payments. We also receive bank information that pull in bank transactions. So that can be imported into our new window of the payment reconciliation journal. What this does is allows us to import that bank information, that transaction information, and it will automatically apply any payment information to open transactions that you have in NAV for customers or vendors. There's an algorithm that it runs through to try to match those transactions. Those can be done manually, or you can allow that to happen automatically, and then verify in this window whether or not the transactions being imported are being matched up correctly to your transactions in Dynamics NAV. So that match confidence is provided, showing you whether it's high, medium, low level of match confidence based on the number of fields that it's matching up on, and you can scan through that and then accept those applications and pull that information into Dynamics NAV. The third one that we want to point out is Word documents. So any NAV report can be customized and created as a Word form. And you can create multiple custom forms per report. So all of this can be customized using templates for Word, or just opening up and creating your own form for that report and pulling data from NAV as data fields onto that report, so that you can customize formats and really gives you a lot of flexibility in how you're setting up your reports in Word and printing those. In addition to that, we also have the ability to do report scheduling. So when I want to print my report, I don't have to do it immediately. I can send it off to a schedule into a queue, where I can later go and look at that queue, print it as needed, or have it scheduled to be printed later. So I won't talk a whole lot about Word documents. This is something where Teresa later on in the presentation is going to talk a little bit more about this because of enhancements that we've made to this functionality in Dynamics NAV 2016. But that's just a quick overview of some of the bigger financial features that were in NAV 2015. It was really fast, quick look at them, but at the end of the presentation, we're going to point you to some resources that you can use to get more information on these features for NAV 2015 as well as 2016. So let's jump into 2016. The first section that we wanted to talk about as enhancements to NAV 2016 is the ability to preview. And there's two features that we've added that help in this being able to see information before it goes through the system. The first one is a vendor prepayment journal. And this is a report. It was available prior to NAV 2016 in the North America version of NAV. And in NAV 2016, we've made some minor enhancements to this report and also made it available in W1 for the rest of the world to use. So if you're outside of North America, this report will be new to you. What this report does is it gives you a preview of payment information in your payment journal. So you have a long list of payments and apply information in your payment journal, and you just want a quick snapshot of all that information. You can print this journal. It shows you all payments in the batch. It shows you everything that's applied to those payments and any error information associated with those payments. So before you post, you can just have one quick look at those and see if there are any errors before trying to print checks, post payments, or continue forward with that batch. The next feature is posting preview. So something we found is when we're talking to NAV users, this consistently came up as a top request for us, is the need to be able to see what I am going to do when I click post, what's going to happen when I click post before I post. I want to be able to see that and understand what exactly is going to happen before I actually click that post button. Backing out all those transactions isn't easy, and we don't want to be sending transactions over without first reviewing that. So the posting preview functionality, what that will do is allow you, prior to posting, view the impact that the transactions within that batch will have against all ledgers associated with the batch or transaction. So it will show us for each ledger how many entries are going to hit that ledger, and we can drill into each of those and see the detail of how each of those, the impact that the transaction will have against each of those ledgers. So some of the benefits for that, one, we'll understand prior to posting the effect the transactions will have against that ledger. We'll be able to reduce some of the errors that we have in posting, and we're just going to have more confidence in that posting setup so we know what's going to happen before we actually click post. Preview is available. This is a long list. And this slide deck is, this information will also be made available out on our site that we'll point out to you at the end of the presentation, so you don't need to copy all this down quickly. But what we did is we essentially went out to all our windows in the journals, receivables, payables, and service areas, and wherever there was a post button, next to that post button we put our posting preview functionality. The next new feature is deferrals, the ability to defer our revenue and expenses over time. So a lot of times when you're posting transactions in Dynamics NAV, you'll need to recognize that revenue immediately at the time that transaction is posted. But there are other scenarios, such as you can use the example of subscriptions, insurance, deferred rent, where you're paying up front and then not recognizing that revenue over time. And then you need to recognize that revenue over time. And that's in prior releases of Dynamics NAV, that's not easy to do. So we've added in Dynamics NAV 2016 the ability to automate that process of deferring revenues and expenses over time, to create that schedule, to build out a schedule on how those revenues will be recognized over time. In fact, I recently read that over 70% of SEC cases are related to revenue recognition. So it's an important area, and it's something that we were looking at in just making that process easier on how we can recognize that revenue appropriately over time. So in NAV 2016, this is a quick screenshot of how that will work. When you're entering a transaction, you can select a deferral code, and that will automatically build out a schedule for how the revenue or expense for that transaction will be deferred over time. This deferral is available on journals, on general journals, sales invoices, credit memos, sales orders, and sales return orders, and those same documents on the purchasing side. So let's jump over and take a look at how these actually work in Dynamics NAV. So we're first going to look at our posting preview. Let's go to our purchase invoices. And create a new purchase invoice. And I'm going to enter a line item. We're going to buy some bicycles. Buy 150 of them. And then we want to post. And note that I left the vendor invoice number blank intentionally. And we'll go up here on our actions menu. Next to the post button, we have our preview posting. And we'll click that and see what happens here. So the first thing that we get is it gives us an error message. So I wanted to leave that blank just to show that when we do our posting preview, we are running the same logic that runs on post. So we're running the same code, we're running the same, creating those same transactions, and running all that same logic, including that error information. So we're going to see this, have that same experience that we'll have on post, so we know exactly what's going to happen. When we do the preview posting, we run all that same logic, we run all that same code, but rather than pushing those transactions into our posted transaction tables, we push them into a temp table and then run a report off those transactions. But it's all the same code, so we know exactly what's going to happen. I'll click OK on the error message, enter a vendor invoice number, hit posting preview, and that brings us to our posting preview window. That gives us a list of all the ledgers that will be affected by this transaction when I hit post. I can then select one and drill down to see detail for each of those ledgers. So on this one, we see, for example, that we'll hit our, for this invoice, we're going to hit our purchase expense account and our accounts payable account for this transaction. And we can see the detail of how that happens. So let's now talk about deferrals. For this transaction, we're buying bicycles. So when you would buy a bicycle, you would generally generally want to recognize that revenue as soon as it's delivered. So we could typically recognize the revenue or expense on a purchase invoice. It would be the expense side. Recognize the expense on the posting date. But for other items, you would want to defer that recognition of the expense out over time as that product is used. So in this example, I just want to use a quick example of a software subscription. So one thing I want to point out here is my posting date. I changed my document date, but forgot to change the posting date. But what this is doing is as soon as I change this item, it knows that to 70061, which is my software subscriptions, it knows that I'm trying to build out a deferral schedule for that item, and it tries to build it out. One thing I want to point out here is that it says the deferral schedule falls outside the accounting periods that have been set up for the company. So my posting date for my default in Cronus International is 1/1/2018. My deferral schedule goes out 12 months for this item, and I don't have accounting periods set up for that. So one thing to keep in mind is that deferrals require you to have accounting periods set up out through the end of wherever you want to defer any transactions. We're basing all our calculations for these deferral schedules on those accounting periods, so we need to have those set up to be able to create these deferrals. So I need to be able to change my posting date, come back in here, select my item. That's my 12-month software subscription, and I want to buy, we'll just say I want 15 licenses of this 12-month software subscription, and they are $150 each. Now note, out here on the far right, we've added this deferral code column. And as soon as I selected this item, I had a default for this item of the 12-month sales, which I should have been purchasing, 12 months purchasing, deferral code. And as soon as that item is selected and the deferral code is known, we try to build out the deferral schedule. So typically what we want your typical experience is that you don't have to think about deferrals once they're set up. Once you know that for this item it's going to be a 12-month deferral, and we know how that calculation is going to happen from our posting date, we don't want you to have to think about the schedule. We can just go ahead and post at this point. But let's see how the schedule looks. So I select my line item, and I can come in and look at the schedule by selecting deferral schedule on the line. And that opens up our deferral. In the deferral schedule, we have at the top the settings that are being pulled from our template for this deferral. So our amount to defer is pulled from the line, our calculation method for how we build out the schedule, when we actually start the deferral, and the number of periods for that deferral, for the deferral schedule. Using this information that defaults from our template, we build out the deferral schedule that's shown at the bottom. Some of the calculation options, and all this is editable. Something to keep in mind is that we don't want you to typically have to edit this, but it is editable for those items that are you may need to recognize differently. If you find that you're purchasing it now, but the deferral, you won't actually begin using the item or receive the item until next year. However that works, and you need to figure out a different deferral schedule, you can come in and modify this. So the calculation methods that we have as options for creating that deferral schedule, the first one is a straight line, the second is equal per period, and those two are very similar. The difference between those is they're doing essentially the same thing, except there's minor differences in how we handle the depreciation, the deferral amount in the beginning period and the end period of the deferral schedule, and that start date. The third one is days per period, which weights different periods, the amount posted to different periods differently based on the number of days in that period. So if I selected days per period and calculate the schedule again, notice that January has a higher amount than February due to the number of days in those different months. If I wanted to shorten the schedule to 6 months and recalculate, I can do that and change the schedule as needed. The last option is user-defined. So once I have my schedule and I select user-defined, it will still build out the number of periods, but it gives me amounts of 0. So if I have a schedule that or I need to recognize revenue based on something other than those options available, I can come in here and manually enter the amount to be recognized for that expense for each period. But I'm going to go back to my default options for the template, calculate, and leave it as is. Now let's go and look at what that looks like on our posting preview. So notice instead of having just 3 transactions, or 3 entries in our general ledger for this transaction, we have quite a few more. And what this is doing is we post, again, to our accounts payable account, and rather than posting directly to our purchase expense account, we are posting to our deferral account, which is unpaid expenses, and then over the course of this schedule, we're moving the balance from our deferral account into our purchase expense account. So we're recognizing that transaction amount over the schedule that we have defined. So we'll close that. So the next step, let's go look and see how we get all this set up. So we've seen the result and how that happens and how that will get posted to the general ledger. And actually, let's go ahead and post this. Now let's go see how our setup experience is. So in our deferral templates, let's look at our 12-month purchase. When we're setting up a template, we give it a deferral code and a description. We select the deferral account that will be used for that transaction, assign the percentage of that transaction amount to be deferred. So we could select to have only 50% of that transaction amount deferred, whatever percentage we need, a calculation method, the start date for that deferral schedule. The options there would be to start on the posting date or the beginning of that period, the end of the period, or the beginning of the next period. And bear in mind, these are just default. We give these as options for the default to begin that deferral schedule. We've had requests for having different options for allowing that start date, such as beginning of next year. Others have requested to have that amount deferred, whatever I have now, have just begin the schedule now and go through the end of this year, so everything is finished and deferred by the end of the year. So there are various options and requests that we've had for expanding these options for the start date. But at this point, if you do need to make those changes, you can make it specifically on each document for the document itself. But these are the options that we have for defaults on the template. Then the number of periods that will be posted, and then the period description. And notice in the period description, we have these data field indicators for the %3/%6. We go from %1 to %6, and what those each mean is defined in our documentation if you have questions on what that means. But that follows pretty close to how we typically do those. You'll see similar functionality on our recurring journals and other areas of NAV. So that when this actually gets posted, we'll fill that in with the date or the month and the year. Next, we'll look at our items to show how we set up that default. On the item, we'll come in here, and in the invoicing section, for the default, we have this new field called Default Deferral Template. And I had selected 12M Sales, that's why that had defaulted in. I'll switch that to my Purchase Deferral Template. And that will be the one that defaults in on that transaction whenever this item is used on an entry. And we allow you to set defaults on items, resources, and GL accounts. So any of those cards, when you open those up, you'll see this new field of a Default Deferral Template. Let's look at returns. So let's say, for example, I need to, now that I've deferred these transactions, I've purchased my software subscription, or insurance or whatever transaction I need to go through. I've made that purchase, and now I need to return some of them. So let's do a purchase return order. I'll create a new return order, select my vendor, and I want to get my posted lines to reverse so that I can reverse some of those entries. Down here I have my software subscription, and I'll select OK. And that will pull in my lines for the subscription. Now when I do this return order, what this does is it automatically pulls in the deferral schedule that was used on the originally posted invoice. So if I had done a user-defined schedule, it would pull in all of that detail of what I had entered in for that original schedule. But then if I need to, I can make changes to this. And when changes are made, we go back to the template to recalculate and make sure that we're running this correctly with our new schedule. So if I go to my deferral schedule, I see that it's now posting a different amount. I've recalculated the schedule because I'm only returning 10 of these licenses that I won't be using. If I had used some of them, I can change the start date to move some of that transaction out. So I'm only, if I'd used 6 months of that subscription, however that needs to work, I can change this and modify this schedule to make sure that the revenue or the expense recognition happens correctly. So I'll post all right, we'll close that. The last thing that I wanted to show is the summary reports. So we also have summary reports allowing you to see for each of these ledgers a summary of what has been deferred and what is remaining to be deferred. So on this report, we can see a balance as of, and I've entered 6/1/2017 for the balance on my purchase deferral summary. And when I do a preview of this report, what it's going to show is the balance of each of the deferrals that's been posted to that ledger as of that date. So all of these deferrals, these invoices, I had posted on 1/1/2017, and as of 6/1/17, this is the amount that's been recognized. There's an amount showing the amount that's remaining to be deferred and the total deferral amount for that transaction. And that will include any invoices, credit memos, or any of the documents for which there has been a deferral. Just giving you a quick snapshot overview of the deferral amounts that you have recognized and deferred through that date. So that is our deferral functionality and our preview functionality. Now I'll turn the time over to Teresa, who's going to talk more about some of our additional finance functionality.
Thanks, Jared. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're excited about some of the things that we're showing you already. I'm going to go ahead and share. Okay. Jared, you need to switch me to a presenter. Can you see it? Okay, great. Thanks. So I'm going to talk about some of the additional features that we added for financials for Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2016. One of those is what we'd like to do is when we add functionality, for example, the word form capability in NAV 2015, we look at this as a long-term development project. And so with 2016, we're actually extending that capability and furthering it to additional documents, as well as additional functionality just around the email capability. So what we've done is, especially for North America, we've added the North American vendor remittance form as a Word template, and in W1, we're adding also the customer statement. And along with that, we're giving you the ability to assign a specific custom layout to a customer or to a vendor and enable that or use that when you're running the process. So if I am running my statement, I have a group of customers that get statement format A and another group that gets statement format B, I can do this by assigning the format to those customers and then just run my statements once using this new functionality. Along with that, with the email capabilities, I also want to be able to say that the statements go to a different recipient in the customer organization than, say, an invoice would. So we're also letting you assign specific email addresses to a customer by document type. So we have new formats, we have assigned by a customer or vendor, as well as being able to have an email address by document type. And these are all of the Word forms. Now I've included some of the forms that we did with 2015, which are the sales quote, sales documents, because we're enabling the same functionality of assigning a custom layout by document type for those documents as well. And I'll show you how to do that as we get into the demo. The next feature we added was positive pay. And positive pay is the ability to basically have a control over your account and the payments that you're sending out to your vendors. It's typically an agreement that you have with your bank where you can upload a file of your payment information, the vendor numbers, the check numbers, the check amount. And the bank will be verifying any checks presented for payment against these positive pay files. And then if there's a discrepancy, they would then reject payment and or refer it back to you as the organization so that to reduce fraud and have controls over what is presented. So we have the ability to define a format, and by default, we have the Bank of America and Citibank as options. And then you're assigning that format to a bank account. And based on that bank account, when you generate your payments, you can create a positive pay file that you can then upload to your bank. Positive pay history is also stored so that if you needed to look at what information was included in a file, you can verify that. You can re-export it following some of the design patterns that have been in the bank import-export capabilities in 2015. We also added document totals on the sales and purchasing documents for North America. So, for example, if I'm doing a sales invoice, in my line item information, I can display my total amount excluding tax, my total tax, and my total amount including tax, as well as the discount amount. So this is as I'm entering in a transaction. As I enter in each line item, it will be updating and recalculating these fields. Any adjustments that I make just gives me a better view of the information that I'm entering it as I'm entering it prior to posting. This was functionality that existed in W1, but now we're extending it all the way to the North America install. We also made some changes around reporting enhancements. Now, this is a combination of, we'll say, North America, as well as one that is specific to just W1. The W1 report update is changing Report 25, which is the account schedule report, by default to being a landscape report view, so that you can add additional columns immediately as you're designing it, rather than needing to go in and change the layout in order to add those additional columns. So the functionality is the same as far as the account schedule goes, other than the fact that by default it's landscape, giving you the ability to have more columns out of the box. The other change is in the North America install, by default for North America, having all of the reports set to the paper size of letter size, 8.5 by 11, versus the A4, which is the rest of the world, we'll say. So you'll see that as you install automatically, it will be there for you. The benefit is that the reports are already formatted. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to download any packs from support, and then the orientation of the account schedule report. So by default, we'll display that, and you'll see that I've got multiple columns on this in the landscape form. So now I'm going to switch over and demo, because that's what I like to be able to do, is show you that functionality. And I'm going to start with the positive pay. So let's go first into the data exchange framework, or data exchange definition. And I mentioned that we have defaults out of the box for Bank of America and Citibank. So if I open this, this is by default an acceptable format for positive pay file for Bank of America. If your bank isn't Bank of America, you can still perhaps use this as a starting point and make changes against it. And the thing I'd like to point out is Jared mentioned the AMC integration. That functionality still works, and AMC does have a positive pay file creation ability. But what we're giving you is out-of-the-box, built into Dynamics NAV, a couple of formats that may or may not work for you. It gives you a starting point. And we have added the ability to have a detail, a footer, and a header line when you're creating these import or export files, which are very common requirements around that. And you can have multiple detail lines, multiple headers, whatever your bank might require. So if I look at my detail for this and I go down to my column definition, you'll notice for the detail line, I've got all of the fields. And this is how the file is going to get created that I can then import into my bank. So I've got this as a default. The next step is that I need to go into the bank import-export. And I need to define. So at this point, I'm doing my setup. I'm saying, what do I need to do? So here's a positive pay one I've already started. And you'll notice that I've got it as a new direction. So for positive pay, we've added a new option for export called positive pay. And then you're going to choose your data exchange definition that we were just looking at. Anything that is set up as a positive pay definition would be displayed in this particular lookup. I'm just going to stay with my positive pay. And this is then meaning that I can set up an export file properly. So now I'm going to go to my bank account. So on my bank account, I'm working with my WWB operating. And now when I get down into my transfer capabilities, I have the ability to say what my positive pay export code is. So this is taking that code that I created in my bank export import. What am I going to be using to generate this file that are my payments? So at this point, I've got everything defined for my positive pay. So I'll be going into my payment journal, and you'll notice that I've already selected a number of payments. Now, this install, I do have it set up that I've got it going with electronic payments. So I'm going to run through the steps of that, and I'm going to create my export file for my electronic payments. Change one thing there, because I need my EFT3 journal name. Just put it on my desktop. This is a file that would be then generated for my electronic payments. I'm going to go ahead and transmit this. So in order to create my positive pay file, my checks have to have been printed, or in this case, I have to have exported them. Now, you may or may not do a positive pay file with the EFT or the automatic payment functionality, but I just wanted to show that it is an option. So I said yes, that the file has been transmitted, everything is correct, and it works properly, and now my electronic payment process is completed. So now if I look under Actions, I have the capability off of my payment journal as well as off of my bank account to create my positive pay export file. So in here, I'll go ahead and select my positive pay, my last upload date, I've got my cutoff upload date, and then here are all the payments that I just created. And at this point, I can go ahead and choose export. So what it's going to do is it's going to take that format that I created in the data exchange framework and create a text file. So I'm going to go ahead and just open it, and you'll notice that I have my header, I have my detailed lines for all of the payments, as well as my footer, which was how I defined my positive pay file. Now at this point, That's the file that I can then upload to my bank for positive pay verification. And I can go ahead and post this information. But if I go back to my bank information, here's where I can then see detail or re-export my positive pay information. So if I look at my positive pay entries, which was under the Navigate, here's where I have the ability to say all of the files that were exported. I can look and re-export that information. I can look at the positive pay entry details, which are the ones that I just created and submitted to my bank. And I can also enter in a confirmation number. So when I upload my file, a lot of times I will get a confirmation number. I can key that in here to make sure that it has been actually successfully uploaded. I got the confirmation, so I know that it was a process that was completed. And at this point, the check processing will work as normal, but the bank will be verifying all information that's presented for payment. So that's positive pay. Now we're going to look at the capabilities around the Word form layout. So we'll start with the custom report layout. And when I go into custom report layouts, I've already started this process. But if I were to start a new one, I can say new, and I would choose my report ID. Now, when we created the Word forms for 2015, we started it in the 1300 object ID range. And we followed that same design pattern for the customer statement. So I've got my 1316, which is my mini statement, and I'm choosing to insert a Word layout. Now the layout for my vendor remittance is in the 10,000 number because it's specific to North America. So here's my copy of my built-in layout. And I'm going to go ahead and choose to edit the layout. Now we did make changes by default to the sales documents, I mentioned that, but I'm going to just start with my mini statement. So if you think about it as a tiered structure, I can assign a custom layout to my company, which is kind of the fallback or the default layout. I can then come in here and maybe I want to change all of my information and I want to change my colors. Maybe I want to go to a grayscale. I want to change my font from that. We're going to go to gee whiz. I'm going to go to trebuchet. And I also want to start getting into, maybe I want to change my font size. So let's change this, go back to my home. I want to increase the size of this font. And at this point, I've already got in all of the information that's going to be created. But maybe I also want to add an additional field. So this is similar to what you've seen on 2015 NAV. I find my file that I am mapping against. I find all of the fields. Now you'll notice that I have my customer addresses. Maybe I want to add customer address 6. I right-click, insert my context control, and you'll notice I've got it in within my block where I'm adding this customer address 6. So now this is going to be added. I can also work with it as far as adding additional pictures or changing the picture. Right now I've got it set up to bringing my, by default, my company picture or company logo. So that is company specific. It'll be looking at that, whichever company I'm printing from. So that's good. I'm done with my new report layout. And I'm going to go ahead and say to import the changes. And now it's writing those back into NAV. And so we're going to say it's grayscale. I could limit it to a company if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. So there, my custom report layouts are set. And I've got other ones as options as well. So the next part is that I'm going to go into adding it to my customer. So let's go to my customers list. And you'll notice that I've got all of my customers. So the way to change this is if I open up my customers and I'm going to go to my Navigate button, there's a new action under the customer layout, which is document layout. So here, for this particular customer, I am picking a customer statement. I am saying what report ID I wish to use, as well as then what report layout I want to define. So I'm going to select for this customer, the new one that we just created, and say OK. Now, we also know that you're not going to email every statement, at least we assume that. There are going to be some customers that you need to print for, but you still want to use the new report layout. If I wish to do that, what I can do is leave my send to email blank, and then it knows that this particular customer is one that gets a printed layout and utilizes the new, the custom layout description. So in my case, I'm going to want to email it, and I have two email addresses. I'm just separating them by a semicolon and a space. And I've set up that customer, and I've also got all of the other customers set up. The last thing I need to do, though, is I have to say which report layout I wish to be using. So if I go into my report selection sales, under here we've got the option for customer statement, and there would be something similar for report selection purchases for my vendor remittance. And I'm choosing to say I want it to print using this 1316 or the new report ID. So I'm all set up. I've got it all configured. I've got multiple customers defined. So now what do? When I run my statement, I have my start date. You'll see this new output options selection, and this is where I get into how do I want this process to run. When I choose print, if I do choose print, everything is printed. If I choose preview, everything is going to open up in Word, and I'm actually going to select preview. If I choose email, however, what do I want to do with the statements that don't have email addresses? I have the option to choose to print remaining statements. And that gives me the ability in one statement process to email as well as to print those statements. So I'm going to go ahead and choose preview. I'm going to select OK. And as I do this, it's going to open up for all of the customers that I have selected. I have one that is using just the default company layout. I have one that is green, and I have one that is the grayscale that I just created. So that's how I do it for creating these new custom layouts, assigning them to customers, and that same functionality works for your sales confirmation orders as well as your vendor remittance. The one difference is that for the sales documents, it is still a one-by-one when I'm emailing those documents out. The bulk functionality isn't quite there at this point in time, something we're working on for the future. So the next thing we're going to do is look at my sales orders or sales quotes, the document totals. So let's open up an existing sales document. And you'll notice that down here I have my invoice totals. And as I change my quantities, it's going to be recalculating my amount. Let's go ahead and do a new one. And I do my items. I'm going to be doing my bicycle because that's what I like, my quantity. And as I do this, you'll notice that the information in my totals starts getting updated. And when I do my tax group code, it's going to calculate my taxes. If I change my unit price, maybe I'm running a sale today or a higher price, it's recalculating as I'm doing that transaction. So I have a view of the information as it's being entered, and I can more accurately define that. When I look at my account schedule, I go into my financial management under my general ledger and my report. If I look at my account schedule, and I'm going to be looking at my balance sheet, here we go down here. And I want to edit my account schedule. You'll notice that I've got additional columns. It just gives me the ability to have as many columns as I want. And while you can do 13, columns, which some people have asked about, you'll need to know that the number or the amount of how wide the columns is going to be fairly small, so you need to keep that into consideration. But by default, it gives you that capability. So we talked about the call to action as well. We did the demo. Look at the NAV Get Ready site. This will give you the how-to, the demo scripts, the videos that we've created for the 2015 features. And we hope that you're as excited about these features as we are, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future and giving you more financial features going forward in Dynamics NAV. And at this point, we'll open it up for questions. And I will stop sharing.
All right, so I can just give a little reminder here. If you haven't entered your questions, use that Q&A block that you see to the right of the main presentation window. We do have several in there already. Jared, do you want to sort of take the lead on these?
Sure. So just looking through these, scanning through, bad audio comments.
Are you looking under the Q&A or under the all?
I'm looking under all.
So I will start with the under the MyQA because there's a couple questions around the things that I was demoing. The first question from Kelly is that for the positive pay export, is there a place you can set up a standard path? And at this point in time, there's not. That is a good suggestion and good feedback, and it's something that we can look at going forward. Next question is, can you add the same report under document layouts for a customer to email it to a different email if all other fields are the same? Can you add the same report under document layouts for a customer to email it to a different email? I'm not sure that I understand the question. Kelly, can you add some clarity to that for me?
All right, so if you want to type more comments in there, I'll continue on with some of the deferral questions. Question from Gordon, it seems that the deferral schedule was tied to an item. Can I use a deferral if not an item, just a GL type transaction? Yes, yes you can. What we've done with the items, resources, and GL accounts is we've allowed you to select, for each of those entities, we allow you to select a default deferral template. But you can use a deferral template on any line. So any of those documents, any line that you have in there, you can select a deferral template and it will continue with that same functionality. It's even more flexible on the general journal. With the general journal, what we've done is we've taken whatever is in that account column and that will be deferred over the schedule created. So it's pretty flexible on that general journal. For the others, it's deferring that revenue or expense if it's on a specific document for purchase or sales. Question is, what is equal per period? How is it different from straight line? Those two are very similar. The difference between those two is basically equal per period is very strict equal per period. So if you have a deferral schedule that starts in the middle of the month, we still take that full amount and say it's $100 per period. Even if you start in the middle of that month, we're going to take $100 in that period and say it's equal per period. Whereas straight line is going to take a prorated amount in the first period and last period of that schedule if you start in the middle of the month and you're not taking a full period of recognition in that period. So that's the major difference there. How is it working with regards to foreign currency transactions? Are the amounts valued correctly each period and recorded appropriately? Yes, they are. So we do take foreign currency transactions and those exchange rates. We do take that into consideration when calculating the amount that gets deferred. Can you use deferrals after posting? So if you're referring to a retroactive deferral, so you've already posted the document and then gone back, you could, but you would have to do it from the general journal. So if you go to the general journal, it wouldn't be a deferral specifically tied to that document, but you could use the deferral functionality to automate that deferral over time by it would make the process easier. It just wouldn't tie it specifically to that document. So we don't have retroactive deferral functionality built into our deferrals at this point. Thank you, Gemma, for your comments on posting preview, hallelujah, and deferrals, hallelujah. So you asked, deferrals are net amounts always without VAT, or can you define this? Yes, on the documents themselves. So if you're entering a purchase document or a sales document, we're going off the revenue for sales and expense amount for purchasing documents. So that is the amount that will be deferred to your deferral account. So we're taking that net revenue or expense and doing that for the posting. Gemma's next question is, email address per document is also great. What is positive pay? I think Teresa talked about that a little bit more. If you need more detail on what positive pay is other than what was presented in the presentation, you can definitely shoot us an email and we could talk about that more.
But positive pay is a North America or a U.S., yes, primarily a U.S. functionality.
The next one from Gordon, if I add a custom field to the table, will it show up in the XML mapping list? Do you want to take that one, Teresa?
That one I am not sure of, actually, Gordon. I'd have to look into that. If you want to drop me an email, I could certainly get a reply back to you on that.
Okay. We'll have to provide our email addresses as well.
Yes.
Barry asks, email addresses by document type, are they maintained on the customer card?
And yes, the email addresses by document type are on the customer card or on the vendor card. On that Navigate document layouts is where they are defined. Now the functionality, if you were looking at 2015, is on the primary under there's a documents functionality fast tab. And if you like that functionality, you can continue to use it. But if you're looking for it by document type and you need one or more email addresses, you go to the Navigate document layout, and then you can do one or more email addresses per document, and it is maintained with the customer on that document layout form.
The next question is from Anita. She's asking where the white paper is located. We don't have any white papers written up specifically for these features yet, but the resources that are available are on the site that Teresa pointed out, aka.ms/navgetready. If you go to that site, the NavGetReady site, we have all the resources which include PowerPoint decks and demo scripts for all these features describing the functionality, so you can get more detail out there. Please clarify the difference between the AMC service, EFT, and positive pay. Also, is there an equivalency for the Canadian market?
Okay, I will try to address that. AMC is the service that basically will create an import file or an export file for communication back and forth between your bank. EFT and positive pay are the processes that these files are generated for. What EFT is it's called stands for electronic funds transfer or transmission, letting you either draw from a customer's account if you have that set up to be able to pull payments directly from your customers, or you're submitting payments electronically to your vendors. And the equivalency for the Canadian market is the same functionality is available. AMC is, like I said, the service provider, and what it does is it has a number of banks already defined. If the bank that you work with isn't defined, you can work with AMC to add your bank. And what they're doing is basically it just allows us to have a generic format for all of the data that we're sending out that we then send to AMC. AMC uses your bank-specific requests as far as what is included in the header, what is included in the detail line, in order to generate the file that you then upload to your bank. So you don't actually need to go in and add a field into your header or change a detail line to meet your banking needs. So AMC is kind of the middle point. EFT and positive pay are the functionality.
Before we go on to the next question, Jason, I just wanted to point out we have hit noon. I'm willing to stick around for more time to get through. It doesn't look like there are too many more questions. If you're okay keeping the webcast open.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to keep it open. And a couple of people asked, we are recording it as well.
Okay. So the next question is from Kresimir. He says, my question is a bit off topic, but I'm interested in whether there are enhancements for developers. There are enhancements for developers, and there are additional. You'd have to go out to the NAV Get Ready site, and I think someone down the list asked, "Can you give us the NAV Get Ready site?" We'll put that up on a slide. Would you mind pulling that slide up again, Teresa, to show where that is? If you go out to that site, it will point you to all the resources for the additional enhancements. So this session was specific to Finance Enhancements. But if you go out to that site, you'll see all the resources for all of the enhancements made for NAV 2016. If you mail the Word template, is the attachment a Word doc or a PDF?
The attachment is actually a PDF. So you're able to just send it that way.
Okay. Barry asks, are Word forms, i.e. statements or invoices, emailed as attachments of Word files, PDFs of that document, or something else? So it sounds like the same question.
They are PDFs of the document.
Has this training been recorded? Jason says, yes it is, and that will be made available. For deferred postings, do you need to have the GL posting dates and user posting dates wide open? That's a good question. So we do honor those posting dates or posting restrictions that you have set up. So in your general ledger setup, if you have posting dates or restrictions on the posting dates setup, or even for user setup, in your user setup, if you have dates for each user in which they can post, we honor those for our deferral schedules. And that was something we did a lot of research on before creating this functionality, is whether or not we needed to honor those. And the feedback came back overwhelmingly that we do need to say, if I have already set up and said that I don't want a user posting out into a different period, I need deferrals to honor that restriction. So that's what we've done. We have received a couple of requests to open that up and allow the option to post out into periods that outside of those restrictions. And that's something we're looking into. So if that's something that you need, please feel free to send us that feedback. We'd love to hear that as well, and we can prioritize allowing that option to go outside of those posting restrictions in a future release. Is the posting preview display one error at a time or all messages in one go? Good question. That is based on the posting logic. So in some areas you'll see messages that are grouped together and some messages that are given individually one at a time. And so so when we hit that post preview, it's going to run exactly as it does when you hit the post button. So in some cases, and I'd probably say it's most cases, you're going to see those messages one at a time just because we're following that exact same posting logic that you would see when you hit post. Okay, nav get ready. A couple requests for the nav get ready site, I believe.
I just entered it in the Q&A, so you should have it.
Okay. So
I think the next one, Jared, is deferrals and FCY. What exchange rate would be used in the future?
Deferrals in FCY. What exchange rate would be used in the future? So that was that's based on. It would be based on the exchange rate at the time of posting. So that is something where you may have to I'd say you'd have to do a revaluation if that's
if the exchange rate changes, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly how that works off the top of my head, but please send me an email if you need more detail on that. I'd love to look into that. But I believe it uses the exchange rate at the time of posting, and then we'd have to go out and do a revaluation if we needed to, if there's a different exchange rate out into the future, which most likely there would be. After posting the document, can you reverse only the deferral part? So, Kenji, I believe if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're asking if you can go out and not necessarily do a return order to return the whole item, but just back out your deferral. We don't have anything to back out just a deferral at this point, so you would have to go do a general entry against those accounts and build out a deferral schedule that's the opposite of what you've already entered. So it would be an easy process if you have a reversal template set up. You just enter in a journal with a reversal template, but we don't have anything specifically that is specific to backing out a deferral. After post, can a deferral handle 445 accounting periods? Yes, it can. So the deferral is going to be based on whatever accounting periods you have set up in your accounting periods. So if you have your accounting period set up to be 445, then our deferral schedule will follow that. All the calculations are based on your accounting periods. When using posting preview and average costing, will posting preview show all of the average cost changes to previously posted transactions? Teresa, do you have any thoughts on that? When using posting preview and average costing, will the posting preview show all the average cost changes to previously posted transactions?
Well, what we're doing is we are actually running through the posting code functionality. So the posting code process is going to be creating that or looking for that average cost calculation. So let's just say if you see those transactions after you post the document, you would see them as part of the posting preview.
All right, thank you. Is there any new intercompany functionality? Not at this point. Not for NAV 2016. But we're always looking for feedback. If there's specific intercompany functionality that you're looking for and you need in your business, please shoot us an email. We love to hear feedback on what you're looking for in future releases of Dynamics NAV. For posting preview, is there any facility to show a before and after trial balance? Requested by accountancy companies. At this point, there is not. And that is something that we've heard as well, is a request to be able to show that before and after. That was just a little bit different scope than what we were looking for in our posting preview here. And we've received requests for other preview functionality, like being able to preview a sales invoice. So we have a list of other things that we'd like to, in future releases, add to preview functionality. We're just looking for feedback on what needs to be prioritized from our user base. So if that's something that you need and that's a priority for you, please shoot us an email. We'd love to hear about that. Do the Word reports still have a large data set background? I'm wondering if the old case of X32 versus X64 crashing NAV where data sets were larger than 100,000 rows, is it worth taking a course in the new report layouts, or will it be longer lived than RDLC? What do you think, Teresa?
Well, the Word reports are going to have a good-sized data set because obviously you're printing them. The difference is that these are generally a one-by-one document type, so you're generating and emailing individually, and then moving on to the next one. So when you're asking if it's worth taking a course in the new report layouts, if you like the functionality of the Word form or the Word report, and you want to be able to utilize that and generate the PDF, yeah, it might be worth considering. I would probably start with the demo and the NAV Get Ready site as far as looking at that information to see if it fits for your business needs. We're still doing reports in RDLC as well. The difference is that there are some drawbacks as far as form type documents, which is the invoices and the statements, those types of things. RDLC doesn't necessarily handle that as well as you can do with the functionality in Word, which is why we looked at Word and also the format capability. It's something that people are familiar with, using Word to do that format. So I would say we're not moving away from RDLC, but we are also extending the capabilities around the Word report. So it's kind of a both option.
Okay, Doyle, it looks like you have a couple comments in here. One is, are the deferral postings in the future or done immediately, or do we run a batch process each month to execute those amortizations each period? And then the comments is, I think the deferrals need to be amortized each month with a batch process. The transactions won't work because the rates can't be known until the end of each month. That's a good point. And that's something that we can look at for a future release. At this point, they are posted immediately, and then you would have to go do that revaluation each month for those deferral transactions. But at the time of posting is when we create that deferral schedule and do the posting in our current functionality. Gemma asks, I heard in 2016 version that there is now a document import and accounting function to replace third-party document scanning functions. Is the deferral process available in this new document handling too?
No, because the document handling, or OCR, optical character recognition, gives you the ability to scan a received document and then utilizing this functionality, have that transaction automatically entered for you. So it's typically more around invoices that you're receiving or orders from your customers. So it is built into those areas of the product under sales or under purchasing. Now, when they're brought in, if the default on the item has a deferral schedule against it, that should be brought in, because just as we do with the posting accounts and, you know, the taxes and things like that, those are brought into the transactions. So we should be utilizing that. It's just not specific to deferrals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay, great.
What email?
I did do a response in there with our email addresses. Hopefully you can see those.
Right. And Emmett, on your question on which email addresses send feature requests to, we do also, we're working on our processes for making sure that we go to the MS Connect site to review those requests, as well as the I Love NAV site. A lot of people will go out to the I Love NAV site and enter requests there, and we review those periodically, but we don't have a process yet in place to constantly review those. So if you do have one that you want to make sure gets to us, please send it to the email addresses that Teresa has provided.
Or go to the MS Connect site for NAV suggestions, enter it, or vote on existing suggestions.
Mm-hmm. That works as well. Doyle, we answered that one, I think. If you have more questions or comments, Doyle, on the exchange rates, please feel free to email me. I'd love to talk with you more about that if you have more questions. And I believe that's it. Was there one? Oh, there was one I missed earlier on about dimensions and posting preview. So Ashoka asked, will it update dimension also on posting preview? And the answer is yes. We're running that same posting logic, so all those dimensions are going to be, we're going to be able to preview the dimensions as well. So from the detail page for the lines, we'll have that button there that shows which dimensions are being hit for each line as well. And I believe that's all the questions. Jason?
All right. Well, I think I can speak for everyone in the audience when I say thanks for taking the time to both present and to answer so many questions from the audience today. With that, we are going to start wrapping up. We did record today's event. Yeah, no, and we hope to have you back. It's always great to have both of you present on the latest product features and capabilities that you've launched here. So we really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to wrap up now. If there is a survey that will pop up after the event, if you have a chance, please do fill that out. It'll only take 10 or 20 seconds, and we really appreciate the feedback, knowing how the experience today was for you. And with that, I will say thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, everyone.